Except, Chris, you know what the joke is? Is that there is no opening crawl, because we're talking about the Mandalorian. What's up, bitches? This is Talkin TV. I'm Dom, the movie nerd. I'm back with Chris.
What's going on, guys? Happy to be here,
Please
as
tell
always.
me, you know what? You know what my New Year's resolution is? My New Year's resolution is that we need a nickname for you. I know you don't like it. We said it on the last episode, but we're gonna do it. I'm the movie nerd. Almost all my friends have like some sort of internet nicknames. You know, we're gonna find one for you. You've been doing YouTube for too long now. You need one. I'm sorry. It's just a thing that happens on the internet.
All right. Well, we'll think about it.
We'll think about it.
I want it to be like my Talkin TV podcast
we'll find a way to work it in. We'll find a way to work it in. Trust me, I'm good at coming up with this stuff. We'll come up with it. But so, what's it called? First off, before we actually get into what we're talking about, it's a little bit of a repeat episode, but I just wanted to say that, again, tying in everything, so we're talking about a season finale. On our season finale for Talkin TV, guys, this is the official final episode for the first season aired in 2019. That's right. Yeah. End of a year, end of a decade, in order to beginning of a new one. I want friggin' 11 more seasons of this. Screw 10 seasons. Screw 6 seasons in a movie. Screw 10 seasons. I want freaking 12 seasons of this shit.
Well,
I want to go.
We're at least contracted for 7.
Exactly. I want to go longer than Friends. I don't quite want to go to the level of like It's Always Sunny, but It's Always Sunny is kind of a unique conundrum in and of itself, but I don't want to jump the shark. I don't want to go like Family Guy or Simpsons where they're just repeating shit over and over again. As long as it's fresh, I will do it, but I want at least 12, and I think that this upcoming decade is going to give us a decent amount to talk about, and yeah.
I think so, and you know what I would say, let's not really put a definite pin on it. The only thing I definitely want to like stick a pin on and like, you know, hang it up for everyone to see is like a sincerest like thank you from us to you guys for listening. We've had a surprisingly larger amount of views across these 16 episodes than we could have ever imagined. It's literally only been 3 months, guys. So the fact that you're all tuning in, like Dom was saying, he's talking 12 episodes, 12 seasons, which is 12 years, because we are fired up and we couldn't be any more grateful. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for A, checking out this podcast, and B, just like consuming it like it's wildfire. Thank you so much.
I'm trying to do the math. If we do that right, that means that that'll put us into the 2030s. That'll put us past the 2020s. That'll put us into the 2030s. We'll be 40 years old and still doing this, bro. I'm down.
Look, as long as these guys are still with us, I'm gonna do it for as long as possible.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the viewers. The viewers, the listeners are amazing. We can't thank you guys enough for continuing to come back and giving us those hard views. I get it. It's an hour. We're asking a bit much. You know, it's one thing to take, you know, like 4 or 5 minutes out of your day to watch a quick YouTube video. We're asking at least an hour of you guys out of the day. But the fact that you were doing that, thank you for that. But for me, it's always been about the content. As long as the content is fresh and there's stuff to talk about, we'll be here talking on Talkin TV. Boom. How is that for wordplay?
I think that was great, and so basically, don't worry, we'll be here as long as you guys are here. We're all going to keep having fun together. Now, something that I think I'm going to have a lot more fun talking about than I did watching is today's episode. Dom, why don't you tell everyone exactly what we're going to be getting into today on the podcast?
I thought that we were actually going to have a nice follow-up. This is why we should have put Watchmen as our season finale. Sorry, I keep getting those terminologies mixed up.
It's all good.
This is why we should have put Watchmen, because, Chris, you informed me that you definitely have a lot more positive thoughts about the season finale of The Mandalorian, which aired this morning. Chapter 8, Redemption, directed by Taika Waititi and written by Jon Favreau. And yeah, Chris, why don't you bring us into this? Because, you know, it's been your opinion. Like, don't get me wrong, we all know Chris doesn't like Disney. You know, I can't blame him for what they're doing as a company. I can't exactly blame him. I kind of can't stand what they're doing. Anybody that owns a third of any industry, I'm sorry, monopolies, not a cool thing. They happened in the 20s, back when really nobody else could stop them.
100 years ago, you think we learned, but what goes around comes around.
Yeah, antitrust laws weren't what they were, but at the very least, we can count on the fact of, guess what? If you own everything, it means you're not going to be able to deliver all the time, because that's what happens when there's only one person. That's why dictators fall. Because at the end of the day, whether there's a rebellion or whether they just get crushed under the weight and under the pressure, power corrupts, but it also eats away at you. So keep that in mind, Iger. Just remember that.
Yeah, Iger. Now listen, here's the thing. I don't hate certain titles on IP on Disney's that Disney owns, like their IP. What I hate is like all that you just described. Their consumption and control and almost dictatorship of the market. So I hate it from more of like a social economical standpoint. But like there are IPs that I love. Like Zootopia is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So don't think I hate Disney. It's just that I'm not going to be the guy who's going to drink the Kool-Aid and think everything they do is amazing just because they're like marketing it with some like bullshit social platform that you can't escape from everywhere you look by anyone in entertainment. Not that I don't agree with those platforms. Maybe I do. I keep my politics to myself. That's one reason. And two, it's just like, okay, cool. Like it's visually stunning and it looks good, but how's the writing? How's the cinematography? You know, I just think like we've lost those questions. So that's why like, yeah, I'm normally not tooting the horn of Disney, but I honestly have some pretty decent things to say about The Mandalorian, you know, a lot nicer than I did about what we all did, I think, about, you know, what was the name of that fucking shit movie? I forget the name at this point because I've just brain dumped how bad that film was.
The shitbox of writing that was from the writer of Batman vs. Superman, the movie that I've already forgotten because I already blocked it from my
honestly
brain.
Can't remember the name because I've blocked
it even exists, you know, all that stuff. We don't need to talk about that, but
but 2 weeks ago's episode, I will be a little nicer about that. Yeah, now, Dom, why don't you like crack the egg on this one? No Watchmen pun intended.
Ooh,
and dive us in and like let's take the first step into actually discussing like the Mandalorian finale and then the season as a whole.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a new territory for us because I think this is the first time that we've revisited a subject matter within, I would say, a certain amount of weeks.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm excited for this format.
Because of course, I would say that one of our more popular episodes was when we covered the premiere of The Mandalorian. And when it aired Tuesday, November 12th, if I'm remembering the date correctly. And I'd say we both had different feelings on the pilot when it first aired. I enjoyed it. You did not, and your what's the word I'm looking for? Irreverence for it, I would say, grew steadily over time. And now that and here we are 8 episodes later. And here's what I'm going to say about it first, is that Filoni and Favreau, what they've been able to craft is, I would say, what we should have gotten before even rather than The Force Awakens. You know, overall, in terms of branching out and expanding upon the Star Wars universe. It may not always have been done in ways that we would have realized, but now that we're, hindsight is 2020, and now that we're on the opposite end of it, what I'm going to say is this. Filoni, having sat through now not just 1 but 2 full animated series that he's done. You know, he did Clone Wars for Cartoon Network, and then he followed it up with Rebels on Disney XD. Overall, I'd say that I don't want to necessarily say I have not gotten a chance to watch Rebels yet, unfortunately, so I can't really comment on that. But from what I've heard, I understand that while Clone Wars is amazing for what it was able to do in terms of, again, getting the subject matter across and fleshing out that era of Star Wars in a way that I would say the prequels were largely unsuccessful at doing. Don't get me wrong, the prequels had some dark moments in them, but in terms of they were still relatively kiddie. I would say the only prequel that hedges much more so towards the adult is Revenge of the Sith. But what Filoni did with Clone Wars, specifically with the later seasons, I'd say second half of season 3 through season 6, the one that aired on Netflix, did for me things that with Star Wars that I never knew that I was good, that I never knew that I wanted, and never knew that I would just watch, impossible, because I never read any of the expanded stuff, I never played any of the video games. For me, it was the 6 original movies and the 6 prequels, and that was it. And then when I started watching Clone Wars in 6th grade, I thought it was good, I really enjoyed it, and that was probably the best age to start watching it, is at 11, 12 years old, and I really wish that I could have kept going, because I feel that would have been a really awesome transition as I matured throughout high school if I'd had that show with me, because that show continued until my sophomore year of high school, and I watched it last year, and it was absolutely incredible, some of the stories that I saw. And Rebels, I heard, did something similar. And now that we've gotten through 1 season of The Mandalorian, I'll say that while the structure of the show is very similar to the structure that he utilized in both Clone Wars and Rebels, having not necessarily one main central story, but rather having it be as a set of kind of mini stories against the backdrop of the overall larger conflict, and utilizing our knowledge of the Star Wars universe at the specific sects of history that he sets each one. Clone Wars between Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and Rebels. Right before New Hope. I think Rebels ends only a couple months before the events of Rogue One. And now with Mandalorian, which takes place, roughly just right after Return of the Jedi, kind of beginning to cover the trek of the 30 years between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. And what I have to say is that, again, while we weren't exactly sure what we were getting going in, because this is not only just new territory for Filoni, his first live action property, but this is also new territory for Disney, opening their own streaming service. And I have to say that for what I got, now that I understand what it is the show is going to be and what it is going to be going forward, I have to say I was very impressed, especially considering compared to, overall just cohesively apparent that Favreau and Filoni clearly knew what they were doing and clearly had this planned out, unlike one Kathleen Kennedy. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts on it. Chris, take it from here.
Yeah, so I can see why you would say that, but here's where I'm coming from. And so I'm actually I'm thankful that we do this podcast for many reasons, but the main reason really is because when you have to critique something and analyze things while you're watching it because you're going to do an episode on it, you sort of can take the blinders off and step out of the whole nostalgia factor when it comes to things like Star Wars and maybe, for example, I know that when the new Ghostbusters comes out next year, I'm not going to have those blinders on, and that's a very big title I grew up with. So that's one nice thing about watching this show. And so with that being said, I've learned a lot about why TV is A, my favorite source of media to consume, and B, I've actually been able to fine-tune even further the type of television I like, and it is not this structure, it is not this formula that The Mandalorian has given us. For a long time, I was very off-put by television solely because of the fact that what I had been exposed to prior, and I'm talking about when I was a little kid, a very little kid, because I actually started off in my single-digit years and early teen years being a movies guy, watching movies, because I didn't know that there was more to television than just your classic Law and Order format where the person gets killed in the beginning and you watch the two detectives inevitably uncover the killer at the end. I was like, wow, so people watch this exact thing in 400,000 different ways. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. And so to see that in this universe from this company that owns 33% of the entertainment industry with unlimited resources just felt lazy. It just felt lazy. It felt like, hey, we have to make a Star Wars television show because A, we bought the IP for $4 billion, I think it was, and we're launching our first streaming service. So we have to have flagship shows because this is the new world of media, not just television or movies. This is the new world of media, right? The cable channel is becoming antiquated, but what's happening now is your streaming services are the new cable. So what did Channel 2 have back in the day? They had King of Queens, which was their flagship show. So now Disney has to have their flagship shows. And I'm sorry, but if this is what they can produce with all the money and resources they have, I'm not on board. Just simply am not on board.
So I guess my question for you, because again, I understand everything where you're coming from, but again, we've talked about this a lot before, how sometimes it can be very easy to conflate your anger, I'll say, at Disney with the overall quality of the show. And I'll admit, for a first season of television, it's not, and now that I've sat through the first 8 episodes, it's not the greatest thing that I've seen since sliced bread. I'll admit, if this does make top 10 TV shows of the year, which I'm still considering it will largely be more so because of what it accomplishes, I would say, for a lot of different mediums, and more so the cultural impact than the overall quality of the show. I'll admit,
what does it accomplish in your eyes?
I am guilty of that. But for me, what I feel this accomplishes is, and I'll admit, a large part of that is because of how much Disney has fucked up with the movies. I will admit a large part of that is because. So I feel like if the movies had actually done their goddamn jobs and been the awesome, planned out sequel trilogy wrap up to this whole universe that we would have gotten, then I don't think we would be having this conversation at all. But clearly that's not the case, so here we are. So again, it's this conversation that we had before where it sucks that we have to expect mediocrity, but when the company that owns 33% of the industry has so far only churned out mediocrity, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be the one guy that just gets pissed off at everything just because I'm not getting what I want, That's not part of what being a critic is. Being a critic, and again, I feel like that's a large part of what a lot of these internet critics, these wannabe critics, I'm going to call them, have gotten confused, is they've gotten, and because again, it's a large part of them are just fans and guys, they have confused what it is that they want to see from media. And we're also talking about a majority of people who don't act, who, again, I'm not even talking a matter of going to film school, because newsflash, you don't need to have gone to film school in order to be able to study film and its structure and how films work. So many of the people that I see on YouTube are fucking doing cool shit on YouTube, and they've never once done film school. They've looked it up and learned. And for those people, I give them all the credit. But here's my problem, is that all of these wannabe critics online are bitching and whining and complaining about, again, I can't stand Alan Moore, going back to our Watchmen episode, but it's my problem with Alan Moore. I can't stand people who are bitching and whining and complaining about what it is that they want. They're not the ones that are making it. And yeah, it sucks that it's fucking Disney and all the money, all the resources, all the power in the world. And it sucks that they're not delivering something that I would say is overall great. But all that being said, For my money, again, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but I enjoyed what I got. I understood the structure. I understood what it is that the show is going for, and I understand its potential for the future. Now, granted, we don't have that yet. We don't know what this is going to be like 2, 3, 4 seasons down the road. Who knows? By the time we get there, I could be exactly in your position where I'm like, fuck this shit. This is just boring, meaningless, meandering. This is going nowhere, and there is no sort of end game in mind, right? That being said, how many first seasons have we seen had to play it safe because they didn't know whether they were going to get a second season? Parks and Recreation, which I have said is one of my favorite shows, has fucking literally, Amy Poehler said this on the 10-year panel that they said they thought they were going to get canceled at the end of every single goddamn season. The Wire battled getting canceled for years, and that's regarded as the greatest show of all time. Again, each of those first seasons, looking back in hindsight, we understand that those first seasons in great shows are fantastic looking back in hindsight. But again, hindsight is 2020. At the time, when those first seasons are airing, how often do you have a hit on your hands within the first season? Answer, almost never. You know, Sopranos, 1 in a million. Lost,
Answer,
1 in a million.
Watchmen.
Breaking Bad, 1 in a million. Watchmen, 1 in a million. Game of Thrones, 1 in a million. Again, it just so happens that they all happen to be cohesive. And again, they happen a lot more frequently in our lifetime because of the advanced technology. But with that being said, I'm not willing to write it out. And again, we've also had this discussion before where...
Oh, I'm not writing it out.
No, I know,
just...
but I'm just saying in terms of the antithesis kind of to your argument, which is where you were saying you're not going to buy into it just because everyone else has their blinders on. You're right. You're 100% right. That is exactly how you should be thinking. But I guess where I'm coming from is I already have that understanding of what Disney is. But that being said, they are still capable of making good stuff. You even said it yourself, Zootopia, Rogue One. Again,
Rogue One is in my top 3 Star Wars films.
Again, more and more a fluke in hindsight. How the fuck that movie managed to be good. Not only good, but my favorite Star Wars movie out of this new batch of Disney Star Wars
I'm actually excited for a spin-off show.
Is amazing in hindsight. Looking back, that I can still enjoy that movie with all the shit that we've had to sit through.
So let me just, because
But real quick, just to finish my point, I guess what I'm going to say is that I'm still going to enjoy the stuff and recognize quality stuff when I see it. And I'm also not going to write something off just because it's only one season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I need you to understand that I'm not writing anything off, but as many movies as you've seen this year, I did a count. I watched 34 different seasons of television this year, 12 of them being shows that came out for the first time this year. And I gotta say, all of them, I think, were a little more bold and daring and had more of a voice, more of like a message that was clear and found than The Mandalorian. And so when I was making my list for our upcoming episode, our top 10 television shows of 2019.
Can't wait for that episode, by the way. Tune in for that. We still have to figure out the order, but can't wait for that. The first couple episodes of season 2 are going to be,
But it's going to be a dynamite episode. And so I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about this conversation because this is sort of like one of the few TV conversations we're going to have before that episode. So in preparation, I've been thinking about this, and it's like, I could easily also have an anger against Netflix. They've sucked up and owned a bunch of the industry as well. And you know, their original shows seem to get more hype than, let's say, Amazon or Hulu. But it's not that like I have like this disdain or this like, you know, bitter taste for a certain company. I'm not happy about the fact that like Disney owns 33% of the entertainment industry, but I'm not happy because our government is probably being bought out and not doing anything about it. And that's a different podcast. So I just want people to understand that.
I was about to say, now we're getting into like shit that like Joe Rogan talks about.
But I'm telling you that's why I'm mad about it. It's not because of what they're making, but it's just like if you're gonna get away with that, if you're gonna like, you know, steal from under us and shake our hand while you're doing it, at least make something good. I mean, let me tell you right now, when I heard, and this is a music term, but when I heard hip hop hi-hats in a Star Wars score, I think it was like episode 5 or 6 or something in The
Probably
Mandalorian.
Episode 5, if I had to guess, the worst episode of the season, which I will give you. Episode 5 is hot garbage, but
I could not have been any more infuriated by that. I mean, that is just like respect for, I think there was a lack of respect for the source material in this series. And I also think that it's just like, it felt very rushed. Like the set design felt poor. The color grade, everything just felt like it was a different tone of brown or gray. And I'm not saying it had to be all bright and colorful. It's a dark story. It's a safe dark story. It's Disney, so there's always a level of safety to it, but it's dark in its own right. But it's just like, I don't know. I mean, when I see all these people like freaking out about it and like loving it, like my musician friends, not critics, or like my artistic friends, I'm like, but you're artists. Like, you make good art, you produce good art. Like, take those blinders off. Now, I don't want to say that this was bad, because the last 2 episodes really changed my opinion, where I will go on record right now and tell you that when we had our conversation today in preparation for this episode tonight, I said to you, hey man, with some consideration, this might actually make it to the lower part of my top 10, because these last 2 episodes were dynamite.
Yeah, they were
dynamite.
Great. Both episode 7, directed by Deborah Chow, which I can't wait to see.
But I'm worried, because I hope that those weren't a flash in the pan. But you see what I'm trying to say?
I get what you're saying.
Like, I'm trying to really do what I think no one else can fucking do. Sorry to curse. Can do about Star Wars.
I was about to say, this is not the first fucking time we've done that on this podcast.
I just don't want to I curse all the time on this podcast, but I feel like I'm actually being like super serious right now, so I don't want to dilute that. And with that being said, like, I'm just trying to fucking look at it from a different standpoint that also is just genuine, and it just annoys me that no one else agrees with me. I guess I'm just annoyed no one else agrees with me, because like, why don't you see what I see?
I get it, and a large part of that is because, again, just in terms of speaking from our generation, when we talk about Disney, we're fighting a whole different kind of battle here, because this is not just another media product. We're talking about a media company that, besides owning 33% of the industry, we're talking about a media company that, for the most part, has control over our entire fucking generation. Literally back to Walt Disney back in the day. Yeah, the great mouse originator himself literally studied children's dreams. Had psychiatrists study children's dreams so that they could design the cartoon characters back in the day in a way that would be palatable for children, because, again, that is Disney's focus. It's why they're so hesitant on taking risks.
That's true.
At the end of the day, 100%.
Wow.
I learned that in my pop culture class back at Duchess.
Okay.
Again, fucking just goes to show you what Duchess has given us. But
good education, I guess.
Teamed up with Ray Kroc, again, the founder of McDonald's too. And you wonder why those 2 companies seem to control everything.
Huh.
But
fucking
Walt Disney
way.
and Ray Kroc do all the research. They were best buddies back in the day.
Look at that. I never thought I'd get a history lesson in The Mandalorian.
I'm kind of shocked that they didn't mention that in the Founder movie that came out with Michael Keaton a few years ago. But
please continue. Yeah, where were you going with all that?
So the whole thing that I'll say is that, again, when we're just to bounce off that point, we're talking about an entire generation that Disney is basically enslaved. Now, I guess the fact that, because, again, we're not talking about, again, you talk about the blinders. We're talking about an entire generation who those blinders, it's not just a matter of blinders. We're talking shit that's been ingratiated in their brains. When they see the trailer, I'm talking people ranging from about, again, our age to a little bit younger to about 30. Again, they see the trailer for those live action. They know it's bullshit. They know it's going to be fucking bullshit. But, again, they see that. They're not thinking, oh, I'm going to see that because that looks cool. They're thinking, oh my God, Lion King. That's all they're thinking. You know? That's what I'm saying. And now you add Star Wars to that? They're not thinking,
the Force
this
is
looks
strong
cool.
in that situation, in
go.
that regards.
You know?
But it's just like, all right. So,
and they're like, and on top of that, they're like, oh, it's not the movies.
I you know what? I needed to hear that, because I can recognize that point. And you know what? I agree with that point. I'm still going to feel the way I feel, but that I guess that I'm still going to, be like, why don't you guys see what I see? But you know what? I like that, because that's what makes me unique. And with that being said, let's actually like move on to sort of like really dissecting this show. And I think like maybe these last 2 episodes, because there was a lot that I liked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
For the longest time, I've been longing for the small scale glimpse into the world of Star Wars that you get from games like Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, and even like the most recent Star Wars game, which I'm playing right now, which is very good, and it's all small scale. You're like a fly on the wall in this larger universe. So I actually think that this show paints that picture really well.
Very well. Again, it's a way, I would say, in a way, giving us what these new movies almost tricked us. Because I'm not gonna lie, between Force Awakens and Rogue One, I was tricked into thinking that the movies were going to tackle that, kind of expanding the Star Wars universe. Obviously, I didn't know back in 2015 and 2016 what it is I know now about Disney, and just what the trajectory of movies have to do as opposed to what TV can do, what they accomplish in terms of mediums. But with that being said, I'm very glad that we have this show in terms of being able to tackle that sect in a way that the movies, unfortunately, looking back now in hindsight, now that we've sat through these past 5 movies, were A, never going to do, and B, I don't even know if they were able to do it.
No, they couldn't.
I would say the closest that we got, because even Rogue One had that bombastic third act, and was so tightly related to an event from the original Star Wars. And again, the closest we got was Solo, and look at how that did.
And that tanked. And so I'm glad that now the IG character from the classic trilogy isn't just like his own singular character. It's like, oh, cool, that was an IG droid. So that's how they act, and now we're seeing another IG droid. And so each IG droid has its own like unique personality trait. Obviously, we got to learn a little bit more about the one that we just had in this past show, RIP. But I will say, like,
Seriously.
that is cool to me, because that kind of adds an enrichment to the original trilogy, right? Seeing Mandalorians, now I can look at Boba or Jango, which I think it's Jango.
It's Jango I believe is the man, and I looked, he was in the Mandalorian, but just to like
so I can see him now as he was in the original trilogy and be like, okay, cool. So he was playing his own unique version of a Mandalorian, but he was also staying true to the clan, the tribe, whatever you want to call it, that he was a part of. The creed. And so for that, I appreciate it. Another thing I also appreciate about this show is you can have big Star Wars action moments on a small scale. Like, for example, that last, like, it was, the show is obviously derived from the Western structure.
Yes,
so
we said that from the pilot.
What do they call those? Western. Mexican standoffs? Yes. Where they're like, he's waiting outside with like only like an army of 50 stormtroopers. That's not quite the Mexican standoff. If I'm remembering, the specific terminology is with the Mexican standoff is when it's like a one-on-one, right? Like Backs turned.
Either multiple people where they're all holding guns, and the suspense comes from waiting to see who's going to shoot first. Again, we did that when we shot our short. Again, when I was ripping off Sergio Leone with the close-ups of the eyes.
But that scene was cool because it's very much so like the bandits roll at the town on their horses, and everyone's like in their houses. The dust balls are rolling across, and they clearly pin down the one building the person they want's in. And so they added a moment of suspense that felt huge, because there's like a child involved. So when there's a child involved, the stakes are always higher, because you do get attached to Baby Yoda. I don't think as much as the memes and propaganda promotional social media posts make you feel, but you still nonetheless, he's a child in a universe that he did not ask to be a part of, and so you feel for him. And so I think that this show did a lot of that right. I just think it took a long time to get there. You know what I'm saying? Because I think these last 2 episodes they're almost perfect television for that Walker Texas Ranger desperado style of television, which is fine if that's what we would have had established earlier on, like other seasons of shows I've watched this year did. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I absolutely get what
I'm sorry to rant.
No,
I just had to.
That's fine. You're allowed to. That's what we're here for. But 2 points kind of off of that is that, one, do you think that, and you don't have to answer it immediately, but just one, do you think that the build-up to how awesome these last 2 episodes would have worked if not for, I would say, again, not filler, but you need some kind of build. That's just like goes back to classical storytelling. Battle of the Bastards doesn't work if you don't have those episodes. If you just lead off with Battle of the Bastards, then you have something like that in every episode. You get used to that, and that doesn't work. Now, that's fine, but again, I think the show did a very good job of establishing that's not what it was going to be. But also kind of add to that, and kind of add to the overall point of how Filoni, besides literally being christened by Lucas as his sole successor during the Clone Wars, because this is something that not a lot of people know. Lucas actually worked very closely with Filoni during the Clone Wars when they were doing it back in the day. And this is why Filoni should have taken over Lucasfilm first, because what he did with the show. And I'll admit, there's definitely become a little bit of a distinction between Filoni's Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars. This is literally no joke. This is how much I got from this one season of television, is that just in this one episode alone, there were references back to Clone Wars with the use of the Darksaber. I didn't think I was going to see that again after how it was utilized in the Clone Wars, but seeing Moff Gideon
when he cuts himself out of, that was cool.
Yeah, literally no joke. The last time I saw that was when Maul killed Pre Vizsla at the end of Season 5 of Clone Wars, and then had it taken from him when Sidious captured him when they fought him on Mandalore. That was the last time I saw that saber, because remember, I haven't watched Rebels. So just learning that, seeing, again, the establishment kind of giving us finally some answers to the Mandalorian, how the connection with Baby Yoda has been established. And I know it's not Baby Yoda, but that's who it is. That's what the internet has officially christened it. Get over it.
Get over it.
Friggin', again, the stuff with the armor The IG droid, again, I'll admit a little bit part of that is Taika, because this is probably one of the first episodes of TV I've seen. Look, it's no secret that unless a director is directing an entire miniseries, director styles don't usually always stand out when it comes to TV. But
Just
the
look at
minute that I
Lost.
saw the banner between those two stormtroopers at the beginning of this episode, that's how I know. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a Taika episode. And I don't know if the focus on the IG droid was Filoni's decision or Taika's decision, but if I had to guess, it's probably a collaboration between those three, because they got Taika's on board. Taika at this point, with what he's done for Disney, is probably almost to the level, not quite to the level of Filoni and Favreau, but he's probably almost to the level, you know? And Favreau obviously got to know him through the time in Marvel. You know, they were both just recently in Avengers Endgame. And just everything that I feel like I've gotten from this finale just solidified to me, not necessarily that this is Star Wars, but that this is Filoni Star Wars. And this kind of goes into, if I'm going to open up a little bit about my personal attachment to Star Wars. We've talked a lot about different people's attachments and what Star Wars means to them, and how the fact of why Star Wars is such a universal topic, product, whatever, piece of media, is because it's one of the few things that everybody can look at and get something different from. You can't say that about a lot of movies, because even the Marvel movies, which I'll admit, again, you hate, I enjoy. But what I'll say is that the one thing that I will say that I cannot dispute with anyone is, yeah, they all feel the same. And for the most part, they accomplish the same thing and they do the same thing for all the people that like them. That's not a bad thing, but that's one thing that I do have to say, is that at the very least, I enjoy it as one overall story, but is not a lot of variety in there. And that's fine, but I do acknowledge that. What I've always enjoyed about Star Wars, I'm talking from the original Star Wars all the way until now, at least from what I've seen with the animated shows, because again, for me, it's primarily been that, the movies and the animated shows. That's about it. I haven't read the books, I haven't read the comics, but what I've liked is, to me, I'm just talking with each individual movie, good, bad, I get something different from them, and there's a unique voice to them. Even in the original trilogy, because again, the most consistent thing in this entire series has been the prequel trilogy, because that's the only trilogy that had one overall director, one overall vision throughout it. And even that trilogy, I find there's different things. I put Phantom Menace next to Attack of the Clones, next to Revenge of the Sith, and to me, those are three different movies, and I love that. Same thing with the original trilogy, same thing with this new garbage trilogy, because as bad as it is, and oh man, was it bad, at the very least, I can look at Force Awakens and I can look at Last Jedi, and they work so well together, weirdly enough, as kind of like, one is kind of like this grand overall, like kind of ode to nostalgia, while one is such a harsh deconstruction of nostalgia to the point of where, yeah, you thought that was great? Fuck you, this is what actually happened. Literally, like the way that those two work in tandem while
Talking
also
about Ryan
being,
Johnson?
Yes, while also being so different.
I knew
and then
that.
you
I
get
just had to
something like
clarify
Rogue
for
One,
the
you
listeners.
get something like Solo. That, to me, is what Star Wars is, because again, if we're talking about how Star Wars is the ultimate pinnacle of cinema, I've already told you about my thoughts on cinema and what cinema represents to me. And so seeing now kind of Filoni enact the vision and get something that, quite frankly, he should have gotten 4 years ago, that to me is what has made this special and what has made this stand out to me. Because it may not be exactly what Lucas envisioned, but to me, it sticks the closest to home as to what Star Wars is, while at the same time still creating its own brand new something that adds a little bit something new to this ever-expanding universe.
Okay, I can see all that, and that makes sense, and I can that makes me understand your opinion and appreciate even a little more, I think, like how you feel and act about this IP. And so, in regards to your initial question, like, what did you ask me? You asked me something
I'm gonna do a
about.
little bit of a diatribe there. Do you think that the last two episodes, that those action-packed, would have worked without the build-up? I'm not saying that the individual episodes were good, because you know I had just as much problems with specifically episodes 4 through 6. But because I even said it, because funny enough, in terms of the filler, I even called it before you did with episode 2, where I'm like, yeah, that was a good episode, but that still felt a little bit like filler, you know?
Yeah, like in typical Star Wars fashion, I mean, you can attest to this more than anyone. I had hope at first. And so with that being said, like, I don't want to really answer that question because I didn't write it. So I wouldn't have proposed, like, the only way to answer that question was for me to be like, to write like a fan fiction script of how to get us to those last two episodes.
Well, I guess I worded it wrong. I'm not saying like specifically from the writing perspective, because
but to me, that's how I think you'd fix that, is the writing.
I guess,
so.
but at the same time, I'm not, like, overall, just in terms of, like, I'm not talking specifics. I'm just talking, like, again, how, you know, from your understanding of how stories work, you know, establishment, build-up, climax, de-escalation, ending. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like the only real episode that mattered much was like episode 3, in a sense that like it helped to solidify the tone of the show, the structure of the show, and also it introduced us to one of the key characters.
But I'd also say that in a weird way, even with the bad episodes, every one of these episodes helped to establish the identity of the show, because whether you like them or not, they're still there and they're still a part of what the show is.
Yeah, I mean, they established the tone, but I just don't think they added to the overall arc of this first season. Now, with that being said, speaking of this first season, I found myself loving the moments more when our main cast wasn't on screen and when we had like the extras and even like sort of like background characters in play. Like I can't tell you enough, and this is going to switch the conversation a bit because we're about halfway through, so I want to sort of dissect a little bit more about like the performances we saw outside of just the first episode. I think that aside from Taika Waititi, most of our main cast, and Carl Weathers was great, obviously. I think most of them fell short.
Wait, you didn't like Taika?
No, I'm saying aside from him and Carl Weathers, like most of them fell short, really short.
Oh, okay. So you didn't like most of them.
The performances were just. I mean, even in that moment when they took the helmet off and he patched him up,
Pedro
I mean,
Pascal, yeah.
I felt like the pacing was all wrong there. It's like, go and watch any classic war movie. Go and watch fucking Platoon or something, and just like, you know, that moment where like he's about to die and you know, they have to leave him and then the helicopters come and explode. Like, study that moment and then execute that scene right, because you had something there, and I just don't think you pulled it off. I mean, that's like what is the memory of the last episode for me. I think that's like the shell shock moment. Oh shit, he took his helmet off. Is he gonna do that again in future seasons? Like, if that's what we're watching for, I'm worried, but I'll still be there because
and I understand,
because those last 2 episodes were strong.
I understand absolutely where you're coming from. Again, kind of the game. Again, my biggest problem with the not Game of Thrones, but the fan reaction to Game of Thrones, where they're only watching who's gonna die next. You know, that shit that I hate. It's like you're not watching it for the story. You're watching it almost like a sports event.
It dilutes the art, in my opinion.
It dilutes it, and I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I guess in that sense, to me, that didn't feel like something like just a moment that was there. That to me felt naturalistic, and especially because they even explained it. You know, but again, a little bit explanation heavy. That's the one criticism I will give you, is that they kind of did just drop a lot of information, like, oh, Cara Dune, she was from Alderaan, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know, I was hit by the revelation. I'm like, oh shit, that's cool, because to me that added so much more to her character, and in terms of, you know, why she went, again, doing what Filoni does best, playing around with our already pre-existing knowledge of Star Wars and using that in order to help fully flesh out her characters. That's what I like. What I didn't like is how it was delivered, and I don't like how we're only getting all this stuff about this guy now, where yes, I loved the mystery of the character, but at the same time, I feel like it definitely got a little bit lost in some of his episodes, kind of just distracting on these weird-ass missions when we could have gotten into more interesting character stuff. I don't think that is the one criticism that I will give you. I don't think this show did a good enough job of balancing character with story. It was a little bit too hesitant on world building. Now, that's fine.
Like episode 4?
Right. Episode 4 and 5 to me. Those are the ones.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you like episode 4 a little bit more than me, but episode 5, that was I was okay with episode 4, but that was
episode
the
4.
That's right, you're right.
I thought
that
it was the
one
dumbest
where I was
episode
like,
of the entire show.
Oh, God,
so far.
what's happening? Because again, episode 2, I was like, oh, okay, it wasn't a bad episode,
Bill
but
Burr
it was
no better.
filler.
He was no better in my opinion, but I mean, at least that episode offered an open-ended thing where we might see those 2 characters that escape come back in later seasons.
Right.
So at least we have that to look forward
Holy shit, they never answered the thing from the end of episode 5 where you just see the light.
Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't pay attention.
You're right.
But
and so but again, but just because there were problems, again, a lot of explanation, last minute exposition that felt like last minute exposition. I don't like that. That is a trope that I am not a fan of. But what I did like is, even though it's there, the emotion I feel like it still shines through. On the moment where it's like, again, a little bit too forgiving of the droid, a little bit too, like, sad to see him go, but I did understand, and I got the decision of where, like, okay, I'm understanding. He finally got over his hatred of droids to the point where now he's actually sad to see this droid sacrifice itself in order to help them escape.
So can I break down that sentence you just said?
Yeah, sure.
So basically, all right, I'll give you half of that as the impact they wanted to have, because what you just said was, I think, like, because they kind of forced those feelings on you. So, like, he did break down.
It was a little bit forced, but it still worked. I'm saying it worked on me.
To me, it half worked, and here's why. So I think that we realized that, okay, he has won the trust over of this droid. This droid saved him, and so we saw a little bit of a change of heart. But they, for sure, forced the feeling of sadness in there when they exposition read to you, I can tell you are sad because my programming says you are sad. It's like
droids are very, very good exposition devices.
And you know, going back to film school earlier, you don't have to go to film school to know about good film. So, but here's something that I can use as an example where I recognize the fact that, wow, that reminded me of a line from one of my student films that I probably watched when we would all go and present them in class at the end of the semester after we work on it all semester, where they're just trying to force that moment on you. That's where I was brought back to, which I don't think you should be brought back to when you're watching a Disney Star Wars production. You know what I'm saying? So, like, yes, I actually was like, oh, cool. You know what? That was like an interesting change of heart. He's maybe we'll see next season him let his guard down a little more with droids. I would like to see this baby make him a little softer but still be a fierce warrior. I was like, cool. This is like, okay, episode 8, sorry, you gave me interesting territory that we can explore, so I'm going to watch next season. And then as soon as I had like that moment of like, cool, things are going so well, let's just watch them end this because I think it's going to be a great ending. They have to just like stab me in the side just a little bit just to remind me that I'm watching the fucking Mandalorian and not like classic George Lucas Star Wars. You know what I'm trying to say? Because it was a great episode regardless, but like, god damn it.
And I'll tell you one scene where I feel like there was way too much exposition, and that just completely took away from the feeling that it was trying to accomplish, which is when they met up again with the armor, when they went into the sewers, and they found all the Mandalorians dead, which was a very powerful moment.
Forgot about that too.
That was a very powerful moment. I will admit, seeing all those Mandalorians stacked up, because again, a thing that I feel like it was not well enough done. It was very well established, not well acted upon, which was his connection to this last creed of of Mandalorians, which again dropped in a few sentences of exposition in episode 3 too. But again, it's like, man, if we could have seen just a little bit more of his connection to this creed, rather than just hesitant on world building and bullshit mission after bullshit mission after bullshit mission. I get it. That's what the show is. That's what this season was. It was world building. But man, oh man, what I would have given to cut out that bullshit episode 4 and 5, I would have taken an entire flashback episode just to show us his training with the Creed. You know? Yeah. I get it. That's not what the structure of the show is. But god damn it, why the fuck couldn't we get that? Why did we have to get, the armor just explaining away the entire relationship with them and how now he's destined to protect this child? Which, again, is basically setting us up, again, if I'm kind of taking your decision a little bit, it's kind of setting us up for more of the same, of just him going on random missions protecting this kid. You know?
Basically, they told us that the rest of this show is going to be just that.
And I'm hoping it's not, but at the same time...
And to what you just said, why couldn't our episode 6 be like episode 6 of Watchmen, where you watch Regina King's character go back and further solidify her motivations?
There's a way to do world building while at the same time furthering the story. I don't understand why it is that so many of these creators get stuck in one. World building, only character, only story. It's like they never can put the pieces together in order to make sure that all three of those things are working together in order to form one cohesive thing. I get it. Yeah. It's difficult to do. Making film and writing this shit is difficult to do. But come the fuck on. You're professionals. You should know this stuff.
Right. And I'm not saying I could do a better job, but we're not here to create this stuff. We're here to critique it right now. So with that being said, I want to sort of transition to like the last real beat of the show that worked for me while we're in, I guess, the more positive section of this episode, although it doesn't really
call it that.
Although it doesn't really feel like that. But you know, I've been the biggest guy on the podcast, but also in our hanging out over the past few years of I hate the goddamn recycled, predictable Disney comedy beats. But you know what? I actually felt that because there was like a little less of that in this, the moments they chose to do that were actually very tasteful.
Way more poignant.
And one scene that I think they actually really nailed it on was the cold open.
Those two stormtroopers.
Yeah. That was because it wasn't like your generic, like, you know, you had the same scene in Civil War that you had in Force Awakens where Kylo goes up to the stormtrooper. Do I talk first? Do you talk first? Or whatever that scene was.
With Poe, from Force Awakens.
Poe, and then you also had that with Iron Man and Captain America. Like essentially the same type of back and forth.
From Civil War, which scene?
It's in one of the Avengers movies. I just remember like seeing them both in the same year and being like, oh, that trope again.
Oh, it would have been Age of Ultron then, because Force Awakens was the Christmas of 2015, and Age of Ultron was our
That's
movie
the
that year.
fucking
Civil
one.
War
You know,
was,
I try to brain dump all that shit. But so like that was actually original humor. So if you want to have humor in Star Wars, at least have your own voice to it. And I think that's really cool about this show.
And the funniest part about that,
it felt like it has its own voice.
The funniest part about that point that you just brought up is the fact of, again, I was a little bit, I was confused by it at first, but then I remembered, I'm like, oh wait, Taika's directing this episode. Taika's worked with Disney before. He definitely sat down with Favreau. Again, both of them, Marvel veterans. Favreau with the first two Iron Man, Taika with Thor Ragnarok. And they basically sat down and they definitely had that scene planned out. And like I said, Taika's humor, for the most part, again, it's been more on the hit side for me than the miss side. Again, loved, cannot stress enough. If none of you guys have watched What We Do in the Shadows again, oh my god, what are you doing with your life? Watch What We Do in the Shadows. It's basically The Office, but with vampires. Oh my god, it's one of the greatest things since sliced bread.
What? I gotta watch that.
Oh, I'll talk to you about it after.
Okay,
I've definitely talked to you about it before. Thor Ragnarok, again, the biggest thing about that movie is, again, weirdly enough, my problem is not the Marvel humor. My problem is with Taika's humor, because I think with that movie, Taika is trying a little bit too hard to subvert rather than actually be meaningful jokes. To me, the jokes in that movie feel too... That's probably the only Marvel movie that I would say the jokes are distracting to me, because they do feel... because it feels intentionally distracting. With both Jojo Rabbit, though, earlier this year, and with that opening scene in this episode of The Mandalorian, let me tell you something. Oh, man, he's got it down. I don't know what he did. I don't know if he's restrained himself. I don't know if it's because he's working with other people, but whatever the case, he has nailed his balance between humor and having it flesh out the scene. And I'm guessing a lot of that is also coming from Filoni as well, because again, it's including so many fucking jokes about, like, that's the other thing that I kind of low-key love is Filoni has kind of gone out of his way in this show to kind of point a little F-you at stormtroopers, as much as Filoni loves the clone troopers, he despises stormtroopers, like, with a burning passion. Like, he's made fun of the fact of, especially in this episode too, I feel like,
that was hilarious. The shootout where they didn't hit a single thing. Their armor
sucks. It gets cracked by a fucking wrench. They're just regular guys who just bullshit when they really don't have anything to do. They're fine trying to shoot at a fucking cannon that can't hit anything. They made multiple jokes previously about how stormtroopers can't hit shit. And so I think that was just hilarious in and of its own right. Again, I don't know how much of that was Filoni and how much was Taika, but whatever the case may be, that right there, that teaming up right there was like perfection. That's the stuff that I'm like, okay, that's the stuff I'm glad Disney gives us. But yeah.
So with that being said, I mean, I feel personally that I've sort of run my course on talking about this show. And if you're okay with it, unless you have something else you wanted to bring up, I'm cool with sort of wrapping this up and going to see Uncut
Definitely,
Gems.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I had to drop that so they know it's going to come up in some way, shape, or form on this podcast.
If you guys haven't watched that yet, you guys are in for a ride. Check out my review for it on Movie Nerd Reviews on YouTube. Not at all a shameless plug. But
so with that being said, I mean, would you like to take this first, Dom?
I mean, I guess just in terms of my overall wrapped up thoughts, I get it. We have our thoughts on Disney. We know what it is. And I feel like even though we may not agree and disagree on everything, again, I feel like, that provides for better content, because I've said this so many goddamn times, the best content is not the content where people agree on everything. To me, that's just boring and repetitive. The best content is where people have, not necessarily opposing points of views, but different points of views. Again, going back to the original Obi-Wan, from a certain point of view. You can call it basically straight up lying, but whatever. Again, because that creates for interesting conversation, because when you have those two opposing point of views and people who are open-minded and want to have discussions about this, even if they don't agree, at the very least, they can come to it and have an open-mindedness. And with The Mandalorian, I feel like, even though, yes, it may not be the Star Wars that we deserve, but I feel like for right now, in this climate that we're living in, it's the Star Wars we needed, for better or for worse. And so with that being said, I guess if I'm giving it my overall star rating, again, not one of my favorites of the year, especially not after, because again, I feel like it went downhill significantly for the pilot. Again, to me, it's not a situation like Watchmen where I'm struggling hard to figure out what my favorite episode is. With this one, to me, the great episodes, one, I still like that pilot. I know you don't, but I still like that pilot. 1, 3, and these last 2 episodes. And in terms of the filler episodes, 2 and 6 were the ones that were the most bearable to me. I'll admit 6 was more so just because I liked all the celebrities that they had in there. And what's it called? And just for the fact that they had Bill Burr in there and it wasn't just like, obnoxiously Bill Burr. Like Bill Burr, I feel like fit the tone, even though that was probably the biggest celebrity cameo that they had that didn't feel naturalistic to Star Wars. And 2, I enjoyed for what it was. 4 and 5 to me were just the only really just painful to sit through episodes, just in terms of overall. But overall, as a cohesive unit, again, it's not a 4-star show, but I'm going to say this is a 3.5. Which, again, considering from Disney and what we've gotten from them over the last couple of years, I'll fucking take it.
Yeah, fair enough. I can tell you right now that I was not at all, I guess, put under a spell by the star-studded cast in episode 5. If there was a good performance... 6. If it was a good performance, that would have been a different case. But as far as I'm concerned, that episode can politely go fuck itself. Now, with that being said... I actually am going to come at this from a perspective that you probably didn't expect to have, and this is why I sort of like to save it for the podcast in our talks throughout the course of the day. Now, episode 8 and 9, as we like to use on the show as a terminology, the word dynamite, that's what those episodes were. They were straight dynamite minus a few mishaps, which we discussed.
Wait, you mean 7 and 8?
Yeah, sorry, I keep thinking Watchmen because it was obviously the better show.
Yeah.
But
tune in to the top 10 episode next season in order to find out more of our thoughts, or just go listen to the previous Watchmen episode, which we uploaded on Wednesday. It is still available on Anchor and Spotify and all of the others places where you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, please go listen to that one. And so with that being said, I'm gonna, in typical Star Wars fashion, I'm gonna put my hope in this series because, like you said, it's all we got right now. That's working on some level. Not saying it's an amazing level,
compared to the movies.
Yeah, so I'm going to put my hope in this series because there were some saving graces there that I think, gave me enough to not be so embittered by and to sort of lighten up a bit by. So with that being said, I think I am looking forward to season 2, but as your parents probably said to you as you were little kids, I mean, I know that I got this before a bunch of times. You're walking on thin ice, buddy, so you better clean up your act. And so with that being said, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. And is that the same rating you gave it?
I give it a 3.5.
3.5. Okay, so I've been a little lower than you on these TV episodes, but that's because I expect a lot about TV. I'm the TV guy.
Yep,
and so with that being said, you guys are our audience, and we just want to thank you once again for listening. We appreciate you giving us all your time in these past 3 months that we started this show. It really does mean a lot. And, if we don't hear from you sooner, have a safe and happy New Year's. And, Dom, why don't you sort of tell them where they can find us, find yourself, and you know the rest. You know how the show closes out.
Well, if you've been listening to us these past couple of weeks, you'll know that we're on Anchor and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the other places that you listen to podcasts at Talkin TV, no G, or Talkin TV Podcast. It's one of the two. And you can also follow myself on YouTube at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTubes, all of the above. I just finished uploading. I have 2 videos left in my fall review series that I did. I just uploaded my Uncut Gems review today. Tune into that. And just an overall kind of a closing point, our last episode of the season before we get into the new year, the new decade, the new everything. This is unknown territory that we're about to enter. So I guess with that being said...
And where can they follow that unknown territory? Like, there's social media links for the show, right?
Oh, yeah. I just said it. All across at Talkin TV, across all the platforms.
Anywhere
Facebook,
that matters, right?
Instagram, any place that matters.
And
Talkin TV. Type in those words into your browser, you'll find it.
Cool, yeah.
It's pretty neon. It's hard to miss.
It is neon, it's pink and all that shit.
Worked hard on that logo.
We did. We made it ourselves.
Yeah, we did.
And I'm very proud of it to this day. Now, with that being said, you can find me anywhere that matters as well, at Christian Ivanko. It's just my name. Don't wear it out. I make music. Look up my band, The Stash. That's at The Stash, NY, as in New York, STASH. You know how to spell the. I hope you know how to spell the. And it's just like we're putting our all into all of our creative projects. Follow Dom's personal YouTube. Follow my band and keep joining us here every week because we're looking forward to what Dom's about to talk about, which is the new year.
The new year, 2020. Can you say 2020 is now a thing? Bro, I didn't even think I was going to make it past 2012 in high school, and here we are about to enter 2020. What the hell? So I guess with that being said, with the normal wrap-up, some things change, but other things always stay the same. Watch more fucking movies, and in this case, TV.